Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Captain CA here for FlatsClass University, and today I'm going to reveal to all of you the essentials for your tackle box for springtime speckled trout fishing. This is one of those times of year when you have an opportunity to encounter some of the best speckled trout fishing you're going to have for the entire 2025. And I want to show you what you got in store. So let's head on out to the skiff, grab my tackle box, and let's dive right into it. Let's see what's the essentials, if you will, in my BUZBE box. Now, when I say essentials, these are lures that I've got a lot of experience with that always deliver. And springtime, as we all know, is the best time to focus on speckled trout. In many places between the Carolinas, along the Gulf Coast into Texas, we're getting into prime time. Now, it's been good all winter, but it gets even better and you have a greater variety of lures that you can employ once we get to this time of year. So, the first ones I'm going to start off with are basically slow sinking or suspending baits. They seem to work the best. So baits like the Mirrolure. The Mirrolure, whether it's the XL or the standard, has a nice little slow wobble down. It's a very slow sink bait, and it has these little tiny, like micro type side to side action that you get out of this bait. Just kind of flicks like this, just like a bait fish. And in the spring, when the flats and some of the areas are just teeming with bait, it's a pretty hard one to get around. Another one I like, it's really came into favor with me a lot, is the Paul Brown Soft Dine XL. Now, I've always said in the past, this is a difficult bait to choose between the XL from the hard bait system here at Mirrolure and moving over to this. But what's intriguing about this bait is it moves very much side to side. So it almost subwalks underneath the surface, and to me, that's invaluable. Other baits that work extremely well this time of year are like the Paul Brown. This is the Paul Brown Fat Boy. Does a fantastic job. And one of my favorites, Catch 2000s. Almost any lure you can think of from any brand that is in this genre that are more like the slow sink or totally suspending. I mean, there's a few brands out there like this is Texas Custom Lures, this is the Double D, this is the J. Watkins series. They've already taken factory hooks off, put lighter hooks on them, and these literally float. These plugs will float. They'll allow you to sit them on the surface and they don't start getting underneath the water until you start darting them with the rod tip. As soon as you do, they kind of stay in that suspend mode, which is very appealing to many of us trying to keep the bait in the zone for the longest period of time. That's the advantage of slow sink and suspending plugs versus swim baits where they're just moving right through the zone and you only have a short window to catch your fish. Now, in my opinion, if you're after big spawning trout, this is the group that's going to deliver for you. But many of you think it's this next lure. Let's talk about this one. Okay, another what I would call banger bait for spring, and I think you all will agree. If you're inclined or ever so inclined to turn on a Topwater, you know that spring and summer are definitely those moments where you're going to get the surface just to get detonated with an explosion. And typically walking baits get the call, and a lot of that has to do with you're throwing the baits in low light. Sometimes even in the dark, you're out there before first light. Or you're looking for those days where you have broken light. That's what I mean by clouds, in and out clouds, but I love a little riffle on the water. So yes, this is the time of year that these bigger topwaters are definitely going to be king. So you'll get a shot at working Top Dogs and Top Dog Juniors and a litany of other topwaters from other brands that do a really good job. But I'm going to share with you something I shared with you last spring, and that is the poppers. I think the poppers are the best this time of year. They have this concave face that spits water when you're working them, which brings a little bit different look to the bait. I also don't have to work the bait in such a perfect rhythm or cadence. This one can work back and forth real fast or just pop straight ahead. And also because of the flat face, it makes a beautiful little herringbone kind of pattern as it goes across the surface. So whether the water be a little slicker or with that riffle that I really enjoy, I think the unique signature that a popper really gives off is a huge advantage for me. Now, I'm going to reach down here and pull out bait number 3 because this is one of my absolute favorites as well. I know I keep saying that, but I can tell you springtime specs love this one. So I have 2 baits that, again, they are favorites. And that would be the 5-inch jerk shads. And I love throwing a stick bait like the Trout tricks. These baits I typically, in fact I brought one out here on a rod, I typically Texas rig these baits. You know, they just have a beautiful slow sink, side to side action. And because of they're malleable, they're soft and freeform, when the trout grab a hold of them, they do not let them go right away. It's not like they bounce off them and go, oh, that didn't feel right. I mean, they feel like the real deal. So they hang on to them, which gives you an excellent opportunity for a big hook set. So that's something that I think you're really going to enjoy about these things, plus the fact that you can work them in very skinny water. So if you're working over kind of a shelly bottom that's got some oyster on it, or maybe even a little bit of rock, or if you're working some grass or some kelp grass, you can really work these baits trouble-free. You really can. And they're a little quieter. So on those really bright days, or when the water's really slick, they're excellent choices just because they're so gentle moving through the water column. If you fish a pressured area, good choice. So they're one of my absolute favorites. And as long as you Texas rig them, I think you're going to be fine. They're kind of what I would call a go-to for me here on the west coast of Florida, where we see a lot of anglers, but I'll bet they'll work in your water too. Just give them a chance and you'll see. Now this next one is a standard by all guides. And when I say all guides, I mean all guides fish this rig. It never lets you down, and it is a cause for consistent action, and I bet you can guess what it is. It's this one right here. The popping cork and shrimp imitation has been the go-to for years, decades, maybe longer for professional guides. It's just the simplicity of the system just simply works. It's hard to argue, even for a technical angler like myself that doesn't do this as often as I should, but it works. Now in years past, Mark Nichols' DOA shrimp and the voodoo shrimp have been more or less the go-to for many of us. But when Z-Man came out with the Prawn Stars last year, the action that this tail has, the lifelike antenna and legs, and the slowest sink as this just kind of moves down through the water, well, it is kind of the most prevalent one that you see now. You'll see this one on a lot of boats. But this system, the whole idea why it works is it doesn't matter if you have bright skies, doesn't matter if you have dark skies, if you have a slick surface, if you have a surface with a little chop on it, not a ton. The popping that this cork makes sounds like a feeding fish of some type, usually another trout. So they hear the pop with a concave face here and the clackers that are on here now. Sounds like feeding fish. And then what happens is as this cork pops on the surface, this shrimp comes through the water column and then kind of glides back down. So they hear the sound, it lifts them out of the grass, and they're looking around, and what do they see? They see this sailing right in their line of sight, their cone of awareness, and they just grab it. I mean, they just grab it out of reaction. and it produces numbers of trout, big and small. So if you're looking for something that will really smash the trout, and I'm talking about in depths of 8 feet deep all the way into as shallow as like 3 feet deep, the popping cork is tough to beat. Now, I don't use it any shallower than that, but I can tell you from personal experience, this does work, and it works well. All right, when I say the next one is a fire bait, I mean it. I mean, this is something that I love using. It's just not one of those things that, well, I feel like I must use. It's something I want to use. I'll tell you what, before I share this next one, let me say this. If this type of information has really been value to you, you would really love joining FlatsClass University. That's because over there, I have structured courses. I have weekly lessons that help you put into play or employ them that weekend based off weather conditions. We have monthly challenges, lure challenges, where the winners win some pretty fantastic prizes from Yeti, Baits Fishing, Fitzgerald Rods. So it's pretty nice. And the added benefit of getting 10 to 20% off all tackle brands, just not the ones I'm partnered with. I mean all tackle brands. And you get that at sodiumusa.com. All right, let's get back to it. Let's talk about what I like to call slurp baits. Now, slurp baits got started years ago with the devil horse, with the tiny torpedo. And then lately and let's not forget the 5M Mirrolure, which is one of the all-time best slurp baits. And you can still get these today, actually. You just got to mash the barbs down because they're a 3-hook bait. But now you've got Choppos out there and Whopper Ploppers and just a number of prop-style baits in the mix now. I've got guys that fish marsh areas that use buzz baits for slurp baits. So what am I really talking about when I say slurp bait? That's something like in this case with the 5N, where you pull it across the water and this prop goes slurp and stops, slurp and stops. And that unique sound will draw fish from a great distance to check it out, see what it is. Now, I've caught more than trout on the old 5M and on the old devil horse, but I promise you, this technique can work extremely well with baits that you don't think about. And one of them is a frog. Now, I love working these frog baits, and I catch a lot of trout on them. These are very high float because they're made from Elastec, so they're very, very stretchy. They float on the surface. I usually rig them on 6/0 hooks, and I just reel them across, and those legs are just paddling. But every once in a while, I'll stop it, because on the stop is when they like to hit it. And then before I pick it up again with a regular retrieve, I might slurp it a little bit, goes, and then start it again. And it is just fantastic. But if you want to try something and have an awful lot of fun with it, and don't be surprised if you catch a couple of snook or big redfish doing it, try out a frog bait. These frog baits are fantastic, and they really knock them out of the park for me sometimes. Sometimes I just like to use it because, well, it's just fun. All right, this next one, guaranteed, I mean, just a guaranteed trout on demand bait that you can use, and you're gonna catch them no matter what. Can't control the size, but you're gonna catch them. Here we go. This bait works simply because even during the periods where the fish, the trout, have less aggression, it might be a weaker tide during the day or a high barometer day, and you just need to have a bottom contact bait, something that they're gonna sit down there in the bottom, and if this gets close to them, they're gonna race over there and just snark it right up. And trust me, they smoke this one. They really do. And that's gonna be the big ballers or any of the scented jerk shads. So whether you go with a 4 or 5-inch, I love this little 4-inch big ballers. And I like it because that ball tail has so much action on the bottom. The other thing I like to do is I like to rig it either on a shaky head or maybe even a football jig if the wire isn't too big, if it's not too overpowering. because I'm working this on a lot of mud and sand bottoms, cleaner bottoms, or maybe sparse grass, not thick grass. And I'm looking for a jig like this one. You see how much surface there is here? You see all that surface? And because I will work it through sparse grass, look at this jig head here. You see how that style jig head is, where the actual line tie is incorporated in the jig head? That keeps it clean, very clean. In fact, if you want to know who makes this one, I've got it right here. It's Untamed Tackle, all right? Now, I'm using this in 1/4 ounce heads mostly, and that's just because I fish this in current quite a bit, like in little choke spots. But it works extremely well, and it catches literally everything. But again, that upswept, bigger, wider head where I feel a lot of I've got so much feel on the bottom as I just kind of pulse it. And what I like to do is just short little hops, sharp little short hops, not reeling. I don't want it hopping out of the water. Short little hops, short little hops. That's what I want. And I can feel it because I'll literally tie this not with a loop knot, but with a direct connect knot. I'll use fluorocarbon leader, which is denser, has more sensitivity, transmits or translates bite detectability a lot better when you're on a tight line and you're on fluorocarbon leader. And then I'm using the thinnest braid I can get away with. Typically, it might be like 10-pound micro, which would be the equivalent of maybe 8-pound normal braid. But that type of braid lets me have that feel, and I can keep this right on the bottom. And that little ball tail just kind of walks around in the water, just swinging around, and it drives them crazy as it moves by them. And for me, if I absolutely positively have to get a bite, you know, we're trying to get some filming done or something, it's hard to beat this one. It's like a Trout on demand deal, that's what I'm saying. All right, this next one has been, well, solid for me for decades. And when I say decades, I'm talking decades. Bet you can guess what it is. And you guessed it. If I said decades, you know it was a bucktail jig. That's right. This is the Bucktail jig from Heath Hipple over there at Bugs Fishing. It has the same style head as this Untamed Tackle. Not exactly the same, but very close. Gives me that upswept feel to the jig itself, and I have a lot of feel if I want to use it as a bottom bouncing type lure. But with the Bucktail, I can swim it. I can pulse it through the water. I can even dead stick it, and it will just breathe because it's rabbit fur, and this stuff just moves around with current, or even if a fish comes down and checks it out and goes by it, it will move the hair and makes it look like it's alive all the time. It's amazing. And when you consider, you know, a lot of these white ones that I like to use this time of year, is because most of the fry or the young bait on the flat is between 2 and 4 inches in length, which this Bucktail imitates perfectly. So I'm going to fish this in swash channels along beaches. I'm going to fish it in little moats around oyster bars. But my favorite way is to be on a nice grassy flat and look for the sand depressions, what we call potholes, and make casts on the other side of it and just kind of pulse it through there. Just kind of pulse it through there, kind of pulse it through there. And those bigger trout that sit in those holes will absolutely, they'll crush it. They'll smash it. It's so much fun. And to me, it's a good sight fishing bait if I see a fish that's posted up on a point or posted up in a cove, where because it's just the head of the bait and it doesn't have a solid body, it has that soft body, I can get it relatively close on a cast and not spook them and still catch them. Now, I could talk about trout lures for your box all day. If you enjoyed learning what I had to share today, please let me think that we earned it. Give us that thumbs up, smash that subscription button, and I'll see you back here in my virtual classroom on the next video, well, tomorrow.